Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is, of course, the 80th anniversary of VE Day, when all Britain rejoiced at the defeat of fascism and the end of the war in Europe. I'm sure I speak for the whole House in putting on record once again our profound thanks and our celebration of the immortal memory of that extraordinary generation that through their courage, their selflessness and their sense of duty made victory in Europe possible. Let us all pray that we can be worthy of their memory. But if I may turn back from the sublime sweep of history to the mundane business of our politics, the government's made very valiant efforts to crowd the airwaves this week, but the unfortunate truth is that it has had another dire week in office. The financial facts of life have not changed. Growth is stagnant. As a nation, we have to raise defence spending rapidly, and the government has made itself a prisoner of its fiscal rules. And before the Leader of the House starts in on the local election results, may I remind her that for all the horrors of last week, the opposition still ended up with 3 times as many council seats as the government. Now let us look at those cost pressures a bit more closely, Mr. Speaker. Just 8 months after a 22.3% increase in pay for junior doctors, an increase described at the time by the BMA as a good enough first step, the House will recall, the BMA has now announced it will ballot its members to strike for more pay. Meanwhile, the somewhat unlikely pairing of Tony Blair and Gary Smith, the General Secretary of the GMB Trade Union, have both denounced the government's decision to ban offshore licences in the North Sea. Blair described it as a, quote, irrational policy, which I quote, doomed to failure, the backlash to which threatened to derail the whole agenda. He said it was caused by ministers afraid of being cast as climate deniers. He's not talking about the Secretary of State for Energy, of course. He's talking about all the ministers and MPs on the government benches who know better but are too frit to say so. On his side, Gary Smith said that climate fundamentalism, that is the Secretary of State for Energy, would accelerate the decline of domestic oil and gas production and increase our dependency on gas imports, directly contrary to the government's supposed growth strategy. As he pointed out, and I quote, across society, bill payers will question why they are subsidising a domestic clean power sprint that is offshoring UK jobs and value. And only today, we've had the news that Ørsted are mothballing their giant new offshore wind farm, as they have made clear they are holding out for even greater subsidies, knowing that the Secretary of State has no choice and has said, in effect, that he has no choice if he wants to hit his targets. Now, Mr. Speaker, we all want a just and rapid energy transition, but does the leader not think that the words of Tony Blair and Gary Smith are simple common sense? And there is one other issue which I think we should highlight. The Leader of the House has received universal condemnation for dismissing concerns about grooming gangs as, quote, dog whistle politics. In response, she put out a tweet that conspicuously did not contain an apology for what she had said. The Secretary of State for Health said her remarks were indefensible, but the truth is that she's talked in the same way about grooming gangs from the dispatch box when she accused people of jumping on bandwagons on January the 9th of this year in Business Questions. I hope we can agree now that this is an extremely serious national issue, and that no one, whether or not they hold public office, should be deflecting or denying its seriousness. And I hope that in her response now, the Leader of the House will put aside party politics, avoid criticising others, and speak from the heart. So I ask her, has she now watched the Channel 4 documentary? And if so, how does she feel about it? Does she agree that the dismissal of these entirely valid concerns has been one of the factors behind what even today remains a huge continuing national scandal? Will she now back the call of many victims for a comprehensive national inquiry into grooming gangs? And finally, would she like to take this opportunity now to speak directly to the hundreds of vulnerable women involved and say sorry?